Hello there. We are going to take a look at how we handle relational data with Cerebral. So specifically, we are going to use two different endpoints, one for getting some projects, and we can take a look at that. And we have to pass a page here. So if I do that, we get a list of projects. And typically you have like a rows property and a meta property. We're not going to use the meta. It's just for kind of like make this a real life example. We also have a users endpoint where we are going to pass in some IDs. So if I say 456, it will just return that as the IDs. And this is just to simulate how you would get some projects with some user IDs, and we're going to use those IDs to look up users on a different endpoint. Okay, so we're going to display this in a table, and we can take a look at that component first. And I've done some preparation here. So we have this app component, and it's getting some state from the Cerebral. Amongst those project rows is loading projects and page. So project rows will be the actual projects. Is loading projects is a state that just indicates that it's fetching from the server. And page is just the current page we're on. So we're going to display 10 projects at a time, and we're going to see how we can go back and forth. When we now render a project, we do so by adding 3 cells where we have the ID, the title, and the author ID, which will be a user. And we have our table, which just changes the opacity depending on this is loading project state. And we have a footer, which has 2 buttons, one for next and one for previous page. And we display the current page. Okay, so this is our starting point. What we're going to work with here is to create a signal that will grab some projects, and then we will see how we're going to use relational data to display these projects and actually look up the users on that second endpoint when we display the projects. But let us get going here. Our main file, we have to create a new signal to grab some projects. And the question is, when do we want to grab these projects? And I will just do that when the app component mounts. So a good name for a signal would then be UpMounted. And what we want to do is first set a loading state. We have this is loading project state we want to set. So let's point to that, set loading projects. And then we want to get the projects, projects. And then we want to set these projects into our Cerebral, like that. So first we have to create these 3 actions. So let me first create set loading projects JS, and I have a small snippet here, set loading projects, like that. And this will, let's see, Cerebral set is projects loading, sorry, is loading projects, like that, and we will set that to true. We're also going to create an action called get projects. Let's use the snippet here, get projects, and this will be an asynchronous action. And what it's going to do is use the current page as a query to the server. And the current page is something we have, of course, inside our Cerebral, because we have all our state in the Cerebral. So let's just check that very quickly. As we can see, we have a projects map where we are going to put the projects. This is like our source data. And we're going to do the same for the users. And then we have the array that will actually display the projects. And this is what the table is going to use. So we're going to have this source data, but we're going to use an array to actually display the projects in the table. And then we have our page, which is currently 0. And then we have this is loading project state. Okay, so back to our projects. This will be an asynchronous action. So what we're going to do is return a new promise. And this will have a resolve and reject. And we are also going to use a library called superagent to do this request. And what we're going to do is just request projects. And we are going to query by using, let's see, the page, and we'll just grab that page from the Cerebral. So when we're going to jump back and forth using the buttons next, we are just going to change this page state before running this get projects action again. So it will always grab the current page from the Cerebral. And when we have that query in place, we are going to trigger and get the result. So let's see, if there's an error, we are going to return reject with the error, or we are going to resolve this by parsing the result text. This is how superagent works. So this will give us the result of fetching the projects. So what we're going to do now is create the action that will actually set the projects. Set projects.js. This is an action, set projects. And this will receive the result of the request to the server. And that was an object with a rows property and a meta property. So what we're going to do, let's just call it projects. And what we want to do here is that because we are getting these projects as an array, but we want to convert it to an object where each property is the ID of a project. And the reason we want to do that is to make it easy for us to do a lookup on these projects, because these projects are not something we're going to display kind of directly. We're going to use it as a lookup. And this is very effective because we can like put a bunch of projects into this this map, and then we can use them anywhere. We can just do a lookup inside them if we want to just display some of them, or it's very nice if we have some cool caching logic and stuff like that. So let's just continue on this now. We want to get our project rows, and we get them by pointing to projects rows, and we are going to reduce. This is a very nice way to convert an array into an object. And the first argument here will be this object, which will be all projects. And the second will be the project. So what we do is we just say all projects, project ID is the project. Then we return all projects. And now the second project will be added, and so on. So now we have all our project rows. Maybe we should just call that project map instead, so it won't be confusing. So what we'll do now is go to the projects. Let's do merge here and project map. The reason we do merge is to, like when we do a new request, we will get some other projects, and then we can just merge them in with the existing projects. Okay, so now we have those projects, and what we want to do now is make these projects available for the project rows array that we have in our Cerebral, because that is what the app component is using to display the projects. And we're not going to push the projects inside that array. What we're going to do is actually push the keys, like the ID of the projects. So that array can use those IDs to look them up in this project map we have created. So what we're going to do here is actually return object keys project map. So we're just going to return basically the IDs of the projects, and we're going to use those to put them into this project rows array. So if I create a new file here, it's called set project rows and action set project rows. And here we will receive the IDs, and we just want to set project rows to IDs. Okay, so let's save that one, and let's get these set loading project from action set loading project.js. Let's just do this quickly here, like that, and this one. And we also had the last one called set project rows. And we have to put that at the end here. Okay, so now we have created a signal called UpMounted, which will set the loading project state to true. Then it will go and grab the projects using the current page state. And then it will set those projects as a map, merge it in with the existing projects as our source data. And then it will use the IDs it fetched from the server and put those IDs into our project rows state. So the thing is, before we can trigger this signal, we have to do something to convert these IDs in the array to something we can actually use inside this component. Because if we render now, each project will just be an ID, and that won't work. So Cerebral has something called, like, it's a mapping function for the state. And the way that works is we can go into our state, and this project rows, instead of having an array, we can create a function. And let us just create this function inline now. You would probably put this in a different file. But this function allows you to like compose the output of this state. And the way you do that is that you return an object from this function, and you say that, okay, this is an array. This state is an array. But it depends on projects, and it will also depend on the user's map. And then we create a get method, and this get method gets the Cerebral, it gets the actual state values from these dependencies, and we get the IDs inside this array. So the thing is that when we now set project rows and put in the IDs, this get method will run, and we will have those IDs available here, and we can map over them to return what we actually want this state to output. So we're going to see this in action now, and we will go through it once it's working. So what we want to do here is return by mapping over the IDs, and we will get the ID here. And what we're going to do is return depths projects ID. Okay, so again, set project rows action puts in some IDs into this project rows array. And when that happens, it will run this method, which maps over those IDs, which basically means it will create a new array and insert these values into that array. And what we're inserting is the projects from our project map inside the Cerebral. So we are just using IDs to map in the actual projects. And this is a really good thing because now we have all our projects at one place inside the Cerebral, and we just reference them using their ID. So if we save this now, we should be ready to grab these projects and display them in the table. The thing is, we have to trigger this signal. And as I said, we will just do this on component did mount. This signals app mounted. Let's see if this works now. And it did. Fantastic. Okay. So what we're seeing now is that the app mounted signal triggered. It ran an action called set loading projects, which did a set mutation on the is loading project state, set that to true. Then it went and got the projects, and these projects were merged into the project state. As we can see here, we can click this actually to see all the projects if you want to check that out. And then we put the project into the project rows. What we're seeing here though is that we forgot to reset this is loading projects because we want that to be set to false when we are done loading the projects. So what we can do now is actually just do this very simply by going to set projects and set is loading projects to false. Okay, save that. And now when it's done loading the project, you see it becomes clear, or opacity is set to 1. Okay, so now we are going to look at the next step. And this is really difficult to handle in any kind of framework and application. And that's we don't want to show the ID here. We want to grab the actual users and show them instead. And a great place for doing that is inside this function we define inside the Cerebral. So if we change this to projects, and that is what we're going to return, and we change this to project, project, and that is what we're going to return. But what we're going to do is actually mutate this project. We're going to add an author property. And to mutate this project, we have to use a to.js method. Since Cerebral is immutable, we can't just mutate it. We have to kind of like export it to a plain JavaScript object. And what we're going to do is say project.author is, and then we can point to this other dependency we have, deps.users, and we will use the project author ID. The thing is that we do not have any users. We have to grab these users. So the way we can do that is check if we did actually get a project author. And if we did not get one, we can replace it with a temporary object. So the thing here is that if we do not find a user, we will create an author anyway, and we will use a special property, which we just define as is loading. And I use this $sign because it's a UI property. It has nothing to do with the data on the server. So we're going to set that to true, and this will allow our component to see this author, and it can check this property. display something in the UI while it has this is loading state true. What we're also going to do is kind of accumulate all the authors that are missing. So let us create a missing authors array here. So if it's missing, we are going to say missing authors push and project author ID. Okay, so now we have, well, on our first load, we have like 10 missing authors. So what we're going to do is actually trigger a new signal. So what we will check here is if missing authors length. So if there are any missing authors, let's point to Cerebral signals and call missing authors. And let's pass in the missing authors. Okay, so what's happening now is when we iterate over the projects we want to display, we will create a new property called author. That will either be a user that we have referenced, or it will be a temporary object with an isLoading state being true. And these missing authors will be passed to a new signal, which will handle the download of those authors or those users, which will be put into the user state of the Cerebral, which again will trigger this get method. And now the users will actually be available and we will see them in the UI. Okay, so let us create this signal first. Let's see, I can save that and go to main. Oops, did I type something wrong here? Let projects. Oops, I forgot to, where is the Cerebral? There, okay. Good. We can go to main and let's create this new signal called missing authors. And this will receive some IDs. And what we're going to do is just grab some users. So let's grab the users and then we're going to set those users. So let us create those actions right now. Get users, this is an action, get users. We will basically do the same thing as we did with the projects. So we're going to return a new promise, since this is an asynchronous action. And we need to use our super agent here, super agent. And we are going to do a request. And the request we are going to do will query these IDs. So let's see, IDs. And we are going to query projects. And the query here is IDs. And let's just do, we will just join those IDs with a comma because that's how the backend works. Okay, so we got the IDs, and when we get the result, it's either an error or a result. If it's an error, we have to return reject the error, or we will resolve by parsing the result text. Okay, so now we have our users. So let's create the last action here, which is called set users JS. Set users, we got the users, and again we want to create a map here, and again we have this rows property we have to use, and we do the reduce, which is all users and user, and this will let's see, set the user ID to be the user and return all users like that. Okay, and then we need to set our, merge users with the users map we have created. And again, we create a map to make it easy to do lookups. Like that. Okay. So let's save this now, and let's see the state of our application. Oops, I forgot to include these two new actions. Let's see. It was get users and set users. Okay, let's see how this looks now. And we got another error. Request import. That's not right. Get users from. There we go. Okay, so now we can see that we got our projects just as we did last time, but we see that we have triggered some new action, and it's actually looping, and that's not correct. What did we do wrong here? Did we get? Let's just check them. What are they? Get users. Oh, projects. We're going to get users. That's the problem. Okay, so it refreshed again, and now it did a reset because our state was all messed up. So let's do another refresh. We got the projects, and we have a couple of new actions here. So what happens now is that Cerebral understands that we are initially doing this UpMounted signal, and it does these 4 actions, and then this action will lead into a new signal. If you remember, our function inside the Cerebral actually triggers this missing authors signal. And this is what the debugger indicates here. So it does a new async action, and that results in a new action called set users. And these users are then merged into our users map in the Cerebral. So what we can do now is go into our app, and we can play around with this author. So instead of displaying author ID, we can check project author is loading. And then we just say loading, for example. But if we have the author, we will say project author name instead. Okay, so initially we have this temporary object, but after it has downloaded the users, it will have the actual user and it can display the name. So let me save that now. And we see that we already have the users. The reason we didn't see the temporary loading is because we have to reset and refresh, and there we see it. Yeah, so the reason we didn't see it was because we already had the users. So if I refresh now, it already has the users, but if I reset and refresh, it needs to load those users in again. And now you see how elegantly it actually just grabs the projects, and based on any missing users, it will go and fetch them automatically and then display them as they appear or are responded to the client. So this is really nice. And what we're going to do now is allow us to change to the next page and the previous page. And this is going to be quite similar to fetching the initial projects, but we have to create our own signal for this. So let's do this quite simply by saying this signals page changed, and then we will bind that to just -1, so we're like going backwards, and with this button we are going forward. And the endpoint API will just build these projects dynamically based on the page that we pass in, so it's just simulated. Okay, but we have to actually define this signal. And that's called page, what did I call it? Page changed. And what we want to do is to first set the correct page. Let's call it a change page. And then we want to get users. Well, actually, we want to set loading projects first. Then we want to get projects. Then we want to set projects. And then we want to set project rows. So as you can see, we can reuse everything. And I think this is important because you might say that this is not dry code, but it actually is because we are using the same functions again. And this signal, this behavior in the application when a page changes is different than when it initially mounts. And now you see very clearly what actually happens when the page changes. Instead of having like one logic saying if this is the state, then you should do this. If it's a different state, you should do this. It's much clearer to read this code. But we're missing one action here called change page. And this will receive the -1 or 1. So we can create that action now. Change page, JS, action, change page. And it will receive the page and Cerebral set page, and we will just grab the current page and then add the page past, which will be like -1 or 1. Okay, so we save that and we save our main file. Let's make this a bit cleaner and let's check our project. And now we should be able to change to the next page. And actually it works, and that's good. So what we're seeing now is when I hit the next button, it will change the page, load, and then get the users. And what's really nice now is even though we have this really complex logic, we can still just move back in time and see everything. So that's really good. But what if we want this to work a bit faster? As you can see now, when I changed well, actually, the really cool thing about this is when I now go back, it doesn't have to load up the users again. So you start to see that we already have this kind of caching. But what if we actually want to cache the projects too? I have created a very simple implementation of this, but I thought it was worthwhile checking it out. So let's just reset the state here. Oops. And let's check that out. So this cache is just an object where we can add an ID, which will be the page, and we will add the data will be the result of the request to the server for that page. So what we can do now is, let me just save that, and let's close some files here, like that. So when we're getting our projects, we will first check to see if we already have a cache here. So let's first we have to import our cache from cache. Oops, cache. What there? Let's just call that data. And what we're going to do is point to our cache, say get, and we're going to use the current page from our Cerebral to see if we have some data there. And if we have some data, we are just going to resolve this promise with that data. If we do not have the data, we are going to fetch it. So if we do that, now this looks quite good. Okay, but we also have to remember that we need to put this result into our cache. So what we're going to do now is, let's call that, well, let's call it data. Let's point to our cache, and that was add. And we're going to grab the page, and we're going to put that into the cache like that. Okay, I haven't really tested this, but it should work. So let's jump into our app. Did I write something wrong again? Let me just check the terminal here. Get projects. It couldn't find the cache. Oh, sorry. And we, of course, have to go to the folder above it, like that. Okay, now let's have a look. So let's just reset everything here so we get a fresh start. Okay, so we're getting the projects. We go to the next page. We're getting some new projects and we're loading up the users. And if we go back, and it instantly appeared. And that was because we were using this cache. And again, we're going forward, but as we go to the next step, we're still loading and we're loading new users. And this is really, really hard to do in applications. But as you can see now, with very little code and no like crazy abstractions, we have been able to create a very effective and good way to handle these complex relations and caching and getting related data as we are loading other data. And yeah, so I just wanted to show you this. Sorry about I did some mistakes, but this is how it is when you create complex stuff. So I hope you learned something from this, and please send me any questions if you want to know more about this stuff. Thanks for watching and listening.